at the scene 50 years ago today, August 1st, 1966. And now here 50 years later on Good Day Austin, we are so honored to have the gentleman you just saw there, Neal Spelce, news director of KTBC, reporter, producer, anchor, and reporter live at the scene at that time. Sir, thank you so much for coming in.
Oh, so glad to be here. And it's right here is where that special you just saw took place right here in this studio.
Right here in the KTBC studio in 1966. What is it like for you to watch that footage of you reading about the horrible events of that day?
Well, you know, it's intriguing, and I don't mind it. It's not as if you go back and say, oh my gosh, I've got a problem here or something like that, or it's affecting me in this sense. It's history. And reporters are historians on the first wave of what happens. And so over the years, we have just approached it and related to it. Okay, this happened, it's important. We got to tell it and report on it and react to it.
Talk about setting the scene on August 1st, 1966, a normal day in the newsroom.
Oh, yeah.
You've touched on this before. Sometimes not a lot going on in Austin, Texas in those days, and yet you go out and cover whatever the news is that day.
Monday morning in the summertime thinking, what are we going to cover today? You know, what do we get out there to do? And I was preparing a noon newscast for radio because at that time Channel 7 was a combined AM, FM, TV operation. So preparing for it, and the police radio, just, you know, it's police radio's going on all the time. And then all of a sudden I heard Unit 248 or something like that. We have a report of shots being fired. Tower, can you check that out? Oh, I thought, oh, well, but check it out. Anyway, boom, boom, boom. That started. More reports coming in on the police radio. So we sent a sports guy, Phil Miller, who was in and getting ready for his 6 o'clock sportscast that evening. And, but he was also a master's student at UT. And so he said, hey, I'm going to the campus for my class. I said, well, Phil, when you get out there, won't you check it out and give us a call? Well, by the time he got there, all hell had broken loose. It was really something. So then we jumped in the mobile unit right here at 10th and Brazos.
Red Rover.
Red Rover. Didn't like the name of it, but it was a red Pontiac, Red Rover. And we hit the Congress Avenue, right out of 10th and Brazos. You can look up and you see the tower past the Capitol. And we started broadcasting live while driving to the campus and talking about what was happening and describing the scene. That was a little after noon. We broadcast the fact that the sniper was killed. Ray Martinez, who was here just earlier, hero, courage, unbelievable. At about 1:20, and then we stayed on the air until noon, reporting live from the campus.
You had that front row seat to history. As you mentioned, what will the rest of the day be like for you today, 50 years later? What are your thoughts?
Well, you know, I revisit it, obviously, as anyone would who was a part of it in that sense. And I'm very proud the university's going to recognize that event with their memorial ceremony coming up in the 11 o'clock hour today. And that's important, listing the names there of the victims, the people who were shot and killed on campus. Let me tell you something, your thoughts also go to everybody else. Now, like Ray Martinez, that guy, well, no need to go into it because you talked to him about what all happened that day, but I can't tell you the courage that it took.
Climbing the tower,
not knowing what you're going to find.
He was going to expect.
Yeah, and he's the only one of the 4 survivors now since that day up there, and he took the lead. And let me tell you, I don't know if he described it, but what it took to stick your head out knowing that a sniper was up there killing people, and there they are, and they're hearing the shots coming up from the ground, and they're, you know, I imagine they're pretty nervous, and Ray sticks his head out, looks and see where he is. Didn't know.
And didn't know what was going to happen, and then Officer Houston McCoy came out there too, and civilian Alan Crum, and then
but
they were able to confront him.
They had to go around every corner. Right. Now you got to remember, whoa, I could have gotten shot. Oh, and then go around another corner. Oh, I could have gotten shot, sort of thing. So that takes, my gosh, the courage and the guts. Oh, Paul Bolton in the center on that picture that you just saw. Joe Roddy, who was at the hospital. Cactus Pryor, who came down into the newsroom to help out that day. Everybody there's Paul Bolton, the news director, before me, and I took his place here. But everybody in this station, Gary Pickle, who shot the most amazing footage out there, every day you think going about their business. We had salespeople come running down into the newsroom saying, can I help? What can I do?
Kind of an all hands on deck.
Yeah, it really was. Nobody ordered anybody to do anything.
Everyone just rushed in.
They said, Neal, what was your plan when it erupted? I said, hell, I didn't have a plan. Nothing like that had ever happened anywhere.
I want to touch on that because now here we are 50 years later, and
Yeah.
it seems like we hear something like this every week,
Yep.
sadly. But it bears, and it's traumatic and shocking for people who haven't seen it when you're in the middle of it, of course,
Right.
just like the first time. But we'd never seen anything like this before. When you drive down to the campus to see what you saw, and from random events, it just didn't register in the mind of regular Americans.
There is no way you had any sort of frame of reference at all. And then on the campus, there was no security anywhere. Nobody locked their cars when they got out of the car back then. Front doors weren't locked that often at home. And it was just peaceful. And the campus, the normal scenes that morning, sweethearts holding hands, walking across the campus, a student falling asleep on the grass, reading his textbook, bored to death, trying to get through it, sort of thing. All that was common at that time and very simple and serene. And then, boom, it just blew apart.
After that shooting, then working in the newsroom, did you start to come up with plans for covering situations like this or tragedies or emergencies?
Oh yeah, and in fact, I hope every television station in the country and every newspaper have plans like that. But at that time, there was no frame of reference. There's nothing. How do you plan for something you don't even know anything about or can't comprehend?
And your thoughts as how journalism has changed since then, because as Dave mentioned, it is an occurrence that happens so often.
Frequently.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, if that happened today, heaven forbid, but if it happened today, these scenes that you see now would be on the air worldwide instantaneously. And how many cell phones?
They'd be here first.
Exactly.
On your phone. That's right.
And the cell phones would be going out everywhere. We didn't have satellites. There were no helicopters. That was an airplane that flew around up there, a little one-engine airplane to try to look at it. So for today, the coverage would be phenomenal in terms of getting out there. And it would be somewhat scary.
Well, how do you think that has, I mean, you say how that has changed, but how do you feel about the changes that we see today? Because we see these images 24 hours a day when a story like this breaks.
Well, first of all, I am glad the journalism profession can cover stories very thoroughly in this sense. How I feel about it, I'm fascinated by the news coverage because I guess it comes from being a news guy. You get fascinated by what happens in that sense. But let me tell you something. Back then, it was so primitive with what we had to work with. And today, it's out there everywhere. But there's a very important element to coverage today compared to 50 years ago. This film that you've been running this morning was all the property, all shot by KTBC photojournalists, all Channel 7 folks out there. Now think about it. All those events that you mentioned, none of them have come up with such compelling film or video as this. Blacksburg, West Virginia, Virginia Tech, more people killed there than here, but it all took place inside a classroom, and no one saw it. Columbine, it all took place inside a building, and all you saw was maybe, my image, was a student clamoring to get out of a window. But here, this laid out in full view in a public space. And since that time, you haven't seen anything like this. So I think every time something happens, another school shooting somewhere, they go back to this to illustrate kind of what happened here.
You say your coverage was primitive, but it still is pretty incredible that right away you were able to get on the air over the radio, kind of to warn Austin residents not to go near the UT Tower.
We repeated that warning over and over again. And we were told it saved lives. I imagine it did because people understand crisis no matter if they don't have a frame of reference. And then, of course, everybody was hunkering down on campus. But an interesting thing, radio, everybody had transistor radios back then. That's how you got news. That's how you listened to music. No iPhones.
Well, the most chilling part of some of the interviews I've heard from you is that you learned after the fact Charles Whitman was listening to you on the radio.
Yeah.
How did you learn that?
Afterwards, I didn't know it at the time. And that's a sick man to plan to carry the radio up there knowing full well. And I remember, of course, he killed his wife, his mother, stabbed both of them to death the night before, wrote a note. He had thought this through very carefully. This was not a snap, go crazy guy. And then he killed people as he was going to the top of the tower before he went out. Laid out all his arsenal, everything. He had food, he had water, and he had the radio, and he was listening. I thought about it later, after, you know, after he was shot, it was over, and my broadcast still blaring. I was unaware when he was shot or anything about it. Didn't know that had happened. Couldn't see it from down below. I could see everything above the railing, but not where he was. And I thought, you know what would I have said if I had known that he was listening to me? And I finally came to the realization, first of all, it was a one-way communication. He couldn't talk back or anything. But then secondly, the guy was so sick to even listen to me describe what he was doing. And another friend of mine, Robert Hurd, who was Associated Press reporter, was shot in the shoulder. Well, Robert fell down out of the way, crawled over out of the way. He was on the north side of the tower, and he looked back up at the tower, and after Whitman had shot him and knocked him down, Whitman grabbed binoculars and looked at Robert Hurd to see what kind of damage he had done to the guy. Now this says a sickness and an evilness about him. It wasn't, hey, I just went crazy and I started shooting everywhere. It was very carefully planned, and it just wouldn't have made a difference if I had been able to talk to him as such.
We talked about the broadcast 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Let's talk real quickly about the police response 50 years ago, because those tactics had changed so much now, what you'd see with SWAT teams being formed, and the whole incident would have been different had it happened today.
No question. Police have a plan, and they have a control center, and they have leadership in that sense. In all candor, we didn't have that leadership at the Austin Police Department here. Every person was on his own. Those 4 guys who went up to the top of the tower, no one told them to go up to the top of the tower. They were not coordinated. They were sitting there deciding on their own, and they took the initiative individually to go do that. Now, a police department today is say, okay, so-and-so, you go here, let's gather at this point, let's bring in, and they organize it and they have it planned. Not then. That didn't happen at that. And that, I think, is why it went on so long. The shooting just kept on and kept on.
And as you've said, people who showed up with their own deer rifles, frankly, prevented Whitman from having just free reign like he had initially at the start of the shooting.
I don't want to get into a gun control debate of any kind, but let me tell you something. While I was broadcasting, I looked over my shoulder, just kind of glanced, here's what's going on, and I saw this guy running from behind me toward me with a high-powered rifle. And I didn't say it, but I was thinking on a second level of thinking that, oh my gosh, is there more than what's going on here? He ran right past me, went up, looked at the tower, got into position, started shooting back. Most of the damage that Charles Whitman did in terms of wounding and killing people occurred in the first 30 minutes or so. But after shots were being fired by citizens and then police who went home and got their deer rifles, kept him pinned down. Before, he could just, okay, I'm going to shoot that one like that. After the people started shooting from the ground, he would have to jump up, shoot, and jump back down, or shoot through the downspouts that were there. And we could see that and broadcast that. But he didn't have the opportunity, if that's the right word, to pick targets like he did at the very beginning. And remember, the first person he shot was Claire Wilson. Claire was 8 months pregnant, and he shot her, great sharpshooter. He shot her in the moon, intentionally. He wanted to kill that baby. And later, when he killed policeman Billy Speed, he shot through an opening just no more than 6 inches wide in order to shoot him. Great shot, but when the people came out and started firing back, I'm convinced they saved a lot of lives.
Just so many remembrances of the day, 50 years ago today, and again, I'm sure you'll be part of the remembrances on campus later throughout the day. We appreciate you taking so much time in your old stomping grounds.
Hey, it's so much better than it was.
We like it. And we'd love for you to come back anytime.
Well, I'd be glad to.
Neal Spelce, sir, thank you so much.
Sure,
Thank you
thank
for
you.
your time on
Appreciate
this
it.
day.
Thank you.